For this week's non-dual lectionary, for the fifth Sunday after Pentecost, year C, we're up to the parable Luke's telling of the parable of the Good Samaritan. So this is one of those, so much has been said about this. It's kind of in the culture. If you say the Good Samaritan or be a Good Samaritan, or we know what that means in a way. So hopefully we can take a look at this with fresh eyes and really look at it from that place, what it, what comes out, what's speaking through it, what's being said in it, and what comes out at us through that place of recognizing true nature or no self. What does it tell us about the nature of reality, of the nature of self or no self, or the non-dual the non-dual thing. So first, of course, let's take a look at the story itself. An expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? What do you read there? He answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live. But wanting to vindicate himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and took off, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came upon him, and when he saw him, he was moved with compassion. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, treating them with oil and wine. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and when I come back I will repay you whatever more you spend. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. So again, so much has been said on this story, and it's kind of in the whole cultural, it's common phrasing, and we all know what this means, but can we look at it from this different view? So I think the beginning here, what I want to focus on, just a couple things. First is the question itself. Actually, the person, right? An expert in the law first is asking. And then the question, what must I do to inherit an eternal life? And right there, that just jumps out at me because from that recognition of our true nature, what's the I that's asking here, right? And the standing up to test, I mean, that's a giveaway too, but it's that small self, it's that ego self that says, what do I do to inherit eternal life? Or what's going to make me last forever and live on and, you know, not have to face death? And the answer is nothing, really, right? If the ego self is asking, it is going to pass away. It does not live on. Um, not as itself. I mean, again, just go with me on that one, right? Because I know it's even that's more complicated, but really, um, and so but so Jesus doesn't answer with anything easy, right? He says, "What's written in the law?" Right? What do you know? And this person gives this, sort of beautiful answer, right? For what, and I think we can think of this as like, what are the tasks of the ego self to live as fully mm, in resonance with like as best it can with true nature, but without recognizing true nature itself, right? That is how I take this answer, right? Is something like, well, if you love God and use whatever word stand in for reality, universe, the underlying divinity of all things with everything of yourself and your neighbor as yourself, right? And I don't know if this is true to the translation or not, but I always like to do it anyway. It doesn't say your neighbor as much as yourself or like yourself. It says as yourself. So I like to take that as just recognizing that your true nature is the same as their true nature. But that's an impossible task for the ego self. It can't make itself do these things. to love God with everything it is and to love the neighbor as yourself. But Jesus just says, you've given the right answer. Do that. Yep, go do that. Um, and if you listen to certain teachers like I do, right? Like they'll like give away the game here a little just to be honest with their students, which is something like this is an impossible task. And yet in the doing or in the trying of the doing of something like this, it kind of can frustrate us in the right way. So again, I'm right here, I'm kind of harking back to Alan Watts, Adyashanti, people I reference a lot. But it frustrates us in the right way, right? It yields like the impossibility of the task, but that boomerangs back to the impossibility of the question, right? Like that the I that is trying to do this can't do it. And so then that like can like blow open and reveal that there is like recognizing the true nature that can do this and almost is doing this always, right? Even in the parts that seem like it's not. Uh, but again, you've given the right answer, do this and you will live. And then, but wanting to vindicate himself, right? To show that he's the one who knows what's right here. Because, I mean, why do you have to be vindicated? You were just told you were right. So that's like a real key that like it is ego self that's asking now, right? And so then Jesus tells the parable. And the person answers, obviously, right? The one who showed him mercy, go and do likewise, right? Um, and so, that's and the parable again is beautiful. It's one of those like, here's like there's a journey along the way, right? And um, and like I just said, in that first answer is like everything the way a good teacher does, right? Which is kind of set up that frustration, that impossible task that frustrates in the right way. Or at least that's what I've heard teachers say, and I think that jumps out at me. Um, but then the second answer, right, is like really saying, no, I'm really asking from ego self here, right? Like you really gotta like if there's any confusion that like if you're trying to evoke something out of me, something out of true nature, if you think that like this question came from both that deep underlying part that recognizes everything always and ego self. No, 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 it's really just ego self that's asking. And I know I'm speaking this in a slightly dualistic way, but I think the point comes through. So then the parable is taught, right? Then Jesus uses the parable and gets the ego to answer, right? But the ego is in that moment like aligning in a way with the resonance of the true self. And so it's like as the journey's going along, as you're going to reach this frustration, as your ego self is going to die, whether you like it or not. And then that opens up the possibility of something else coming through and arising that's always been there. Like here's the way along the way to live as closely as possible in resonance with true nature. And I like that word resonance, right? Because it's like the ego self can't make it. It cannot. It's like impossible for it to get its to grab around and get it right and get the concept right and get the task right and get the idea right. But at the same time, there's kind of like there can be something that's like a little better, more resonant, more in alignment, or a little not. And here's like, okay, it's going to be impossible, this huge task that's going to frustrate. But at the same time, along the way, hey, go and do like this, right? And that I think is like, so Jesus as non-dual teacher who's both pointing the way, right? In the way of a classic spiritual teacher, a classic wisdom teacher, right? Like here's your like koan, here's your task, here's your direction. Come back in a couple of years, right? With the new questions that have come up along the way. But also, when it becomes really clear, like, no, I really need you to tell me the task to do. Okay, well, to live as an alignment with love, and I'm going to say love here because again, I think, a lot of teachers talk about the different aspects of that recognition, and love is one that shines through. To live as most in alignment with love, which is, Jesus's kind of core, uh, kind of the flavor of his recognition more than else would do like this, right? Care for others regardless of who you are, regardless of who they are. Uh, And that's just a beautiful little lesson. And obviously, I'm not saying anything new there. But yeah, I mean, um, at the same time, there's I think the beauty of the parable with the introduction too, right, is it tells us something about like, it's Jesus pointing at again like what is already, but also like, hey, Jesus as teacher that isn't just like, hey, you're not getting it. Let me try to make you get it. But like, okay, here's the nugget, here's the thing to like noodle in your conceptual mind that's going to frustrate you, but in the right way. And also along the way, hey, here's how you manifest in action love as best as possible in the best way that I know how to communicate. He knows how to communicate as someone who is already manifesting that. So like, pointing at what is and what can be in the becoming along the way. And if that's not beautiful, what is?